Hello, welcome to today's Bible study of the Banking Blessings Ministry. Today, our study of the Jacob's family is going to shift gear. Up to the last Bible study, we were focusing on Jacob. Jacob was the center of activities. Starting from today, Joseph is going to become the center of activities. The family had settled in Canaan. Benjamin has been born, so Jacob now has 12 male children. Their main business was taking care of rearing animals. So we'll see how this features in the story. So today, our Bible study is going to look at an interaction between Joseph and his brothers, in which Joseph was sold into slavery. We'll look at the things that we believe caused this to happen. We will learn basically two things. That we'll learn about the tragic family event that nearly claimed Joseph's life. His brothers conspired to kill him, but eventually ended up selling him into slavery. We will also discuss our understanding of these things, and it appears to us that the polygamist structure of Jacob's family may have contributed to this event. Everything we'll do today is based on Genesis chapter 37, verses 1 through 36. We will start with the relationship between Joseph and his brothers. The Bible tells us the senior brothers hated him because they believed that he stole their father's love. Their father Jacob loved him and his little brother Benjamin more than he loved the senior brothers. So they reacted unfavorably to this. They believed that it is his father that loved him more and appeared to love them less, but somehow they blamed Joseph for this. They believe he stole their father's love for them. Israel didn't hide his love, his special love for Joseph. He didn't hide it, and in fact, he made him this dress and a richly ornamented robe that always made his brothers jealous. Why was he the person that received such a dress? Another incident that happened on a number of occasions, Joseph was with some of his senior brothers, the children of Zilpah and Bilhah. And Joseph brought a bad report that they did something in the field that he felt was bad, and when they went home, he reported to his father. Of course, this usually doesn't result in something good between brothers. They look at it as squealing. Let us read about these interactions in Genesis 37, verses 1 through 4.
Genesis 37 verses 1 through to 4. Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report about them. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made a richly ornamented robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him, and they could not speak a kind word to him.
They hated him and they couldn't speak a kind word. Honey, anytime you want to say something about the reading, just let me know. Okay. They hated him. They didn't have anything kind to say about him. To make it worse, he dreamed He had dreams that put him in a position, what looked like a position of authority over his brothers and over his parents. And he didn't keep these dreams to himself. He told his brothers, basically he told his brothers, and we'll see his reaction, their reaction to his telling them about the dream. And then later on he told his parents. And none of, each of them, the parents, the father wondered, about these things. He scolded him. He didn't want him to think that his parents and his senior brothers would become, that he would be in a position of authority over them one day. He scolded him, but in his mind, in his heart, he kept pondering what this might mean. Let us read about this in Genesis 37, 5 to 11.
Verse 5. Joseph had a dream, and when he had told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field, when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it." His brothers said to him, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. Then he had another dream, and he told this to his brothers. "Listen," he said, "I had another dream, and this time the sun and the moon and the 11 stars were bowing down to me." When he told his father as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, "What is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you?" His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in his mind.
So this defines the kind of tells us about the interactions between Joseph and his brothers. They were not happy with him. They believe he stole their father's love, and then he had these dreams that basically is telling them he thinks that one day they were going to bow down to him. He was going to be in a position of authority under him. So they didn't like this, and the relationship between him and them got worse until the next incident. Okay, Jacob sent his Joseph to go and check on his senior brothers that were in the field. They were out in the field tending the flock, and they were in a place near Shechem, and they've been there a while. So he sent him to take supplies to them and see how they were doing. Joseph went there, looked for them. He didn't find them. He kept looking, and we see in here that Joseph is somebody that when he is given a task, he will stay on it until he accomplished it. A lot of children these days, if they were sent, they would go look for their brother. He didn't see them. They would just go back and tell the father, say, "Oh, I went there, I didn't see them." But he didn't do that. Instead, he looked for them. He knew that the task was to take supplies to them, not just to go to Shechem and come back. So he looked for them. He still didn't find them, but he found somebody that told him that they had moved on to a place called Dothan. So he went there to look for them. When they saw him coming, this is people he had been looking for, fondly looking for, and very happy that he had found them. But when they saw him coming, they plotted to kill him. They said, "Oh, here comes the dreamer." Let us read about this in Genesis 37 verses 12 to 20.
Verse 12. Now his brothers had gone to graze their father's flocks near Shechem, and Israel said to Joseph, "As you know, your brothers are grazing the flocks near Shechem. Come, I am going to send you to them." "Very well," he replied. So he said to him, "Go and see if all is well with your brothers and with the flocks, and bring word back to me." Then he sent him off from the valley of Hebron. When Joseph arrived at Shechem, a man found him wandering around in the fields and asked him, "What are you looking for?" He replied, "I'm looking for my brothers. Can you tell me where they are grazing their flocks?" "They have moved on from here," the man answered. "I heard them say, 'Let's go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan. But they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. "Here comes the dreamer," they said to each other. "Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns, and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams."
When Reuben, the most senior brother, noticed what was going on, he felt that this needed to be controlled, that something bad, something terrible could happen. He himself probably wasn't fond of Joseph either, but he didn't want them to go as far as killing him. So he looked for a way to convince his brothers not to kill Joseph. He proposed to them a compromise and said, "Please let us throw him into the well instead. Let us not kill him. Let us not get his blood on our hands." His hope had been that after they throw him into the well, he will come back later on and rescue him and take him back to his father. His brothers agreed. When Joseph arrived, they got hold of him, stripped his robe, and threw him into the well. Luckily for him, the well was dry. Let us read about this in Genesis 37, verses 21 to 24.
Verse 21. When Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. "Let's not take his life," he said. "Don't shed any blood. Throw him into this cistern here in the desert, but don't lay a hand on him." Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the richly ornamented robe he was wearing, and they took him and threw him into the cistern. Now the cistern was empty and there was no water in it.
Well, as they stayed on and interacted with them, they knew that Joseph was there. They didn't know what to do about him. Judah talked to his brother and said, "Look, why do we leave him in the well there?" Because he saw some merchants passing. He said, let us pull him from the well and sell him to these merchants. He said that, "Look, we get nothing by killing him. If we kill him, his blood will be on our hands, and we will not, it's not in our interest to do that. But we can sell him to slavery, or we can sell him to these merchants, and we will not know what happened to him. If they kill him, that's their problem." So he convinced his brothers that the right thing to do was pull Joseph from the well and sell him to the merchants. They sold him to Ishmaelite, Midianite merchants they were called, that were traveling to Egypt, to sell things. These were traders going from Midian to Egypt. They sold Joseph to them for 20 shekels, which today is worth about 8 ounces of silver. Let us read about this in verses 25 to 28.
Verse 25. As they sat down to eat their meal, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." His brothers agreed. So when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt.
Well, so that brought Joseph into another chapter of his life, and we are going to look at that in another Bible study. But then they needed to tell their father. They needed to somehow convince. They needed to complete their conspiracy. So they discussed among themselves, what they were going to tell the father. But the first thing that happened was Reuben came back. Remember, Reuben had convinced them to put him in the well, believing that he would be able to rescue him. When he came back, he wasn't there when they sold him to the merchants. When he came back, he quickly went to the well to look for him and realized he wasn't there. So he came back to them and asked them, now what happened? What happened to the boy? When he realized, they told him they had sold him, and now they conspired to lie about this event, to try to convince their father to tell another story to their father to cover up what they did. We will look at that story, but first of all, let us read the details from verses 29 and 30.
Verse 29, when Reuben returned to the cistern and saw that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes. He went back to his brothers and said, the boy isn't there. Where can I turn now?
And what was the conspiracy? They took the garment that they had taken from him and soaked it in goat blood, and then took the robe back to their father and claimed that they found it, that they were walking around, walking along, and they found this robe soaked in blood. Could their father look at it and see whether it belonged to their brother? Israel quickly recognized the robe, and that meant something very, very bad. He felt something very, very bad had happened to Joseph. He really could not be comforted, because he believed that an animal had eaten Joseph, and that's why they found his garment soaked in blood. Of course, they didn't have a way of testing the blood. There was really no suspicion. He believed that that's what happened. So he mourned for his son, and they did everything to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. Let us read about this in verses 31 through 36.
Verse 31. Then they got Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, and dipped the robe in the blood. They took the ornamented robe back to their father and said, we found this. Examine it to see whether it is your son's robe. He recognized it and said, it is my son's robe. Some ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces. Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. No, he said, in mourning will I go down to the grave to my son. So his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard.
So that was the story. He went to the field to look for his brothers, to take them supplies, to check on them and see whether they were doing well. He got there, they conspired to kill him, but were convinced to eventually sell him to merchants, and then they made up this story that convinced their father that their brother had been eaten by a wild animal. What really happened here? Why? These are members of the same family. How come that 10 brothers conspired to kill one of their own, their junior brother? It's the one thing we know is that Israel loved Joseph more than he loved the other brothers, and this made them jealous. We believe that this may have also, a contributing factor may have been the unhealthy relationship, the unhealthy competition that existed in Israel's family because of the polygamous nature of the family. We saw that when the children were being born, they were given names that reflected out of 12 children, 12 men that were born to him. 9 of them were named to sort of talk about the rivalry between Leah and Rachel. Judah was named to praise God. Joseph was in fact a prayer for another son, and then Benjamin was named after love. So 3 received what we would call names of love, or names of worship, praise to God, or worship to God, thankfulness to God for the child. But the other 9 were named after not after, but were named in a way to talk about, to take shots at each other, to continue the rivalry between Rachel and Leah. It is possible that Rachel and Leah passed this rivalry to their children, that they told them things, or the children picked up things from them that made them feel unfriendly towards each other. There's also the maid servants, Bilhah and Zilpah, that through circumstances of the family got to play the role of, they essentially became wives also. So just Jacob was married to 4 women. Each of these 2 maid servants had 2 children, and probably were concerned about the relationship between their children and the other children, concerned that their children might be treated as second class. So they probably told them, kept telling them things, don't allow yourself to be treated as a second class. So these are things that could have sowed seeds of discord. But the most important thing is that it was very clear to the other children that their father loved Joseph more than he loved them. Yes, a man cannot love several children equally. There is a tendency to love one, but this is one of the areas where, as the father of a family, you have to become conscious of what you are doing. Yes, try to love your children equally. Something in your heart may make you love one different from the more than you love the others, but try to cool it down. Try not to show it, because it can create enmity among the children. They begin to think that the one who was loved stole the love, even though it's not really his fault that he was loved. Of course, Joseph didn't help it. Remember the incident of telling on the children of his senior brothers when they did something that he considered bad in the field. He went back and told his brothers, told his father, and then he had these dreams that he shared with them, believing he shared with them for whatever reason we don't know. But it didn't help matters, because he placed him he gave them the impression he was thinking that he would one day be in a position of authority over them. Honey, I don't know if you have something about this tumultuous relationship between Joseph and his brothers.
Yes, indeed. I think you have mentioned most of what we do know and what we can pick, not directly from the Bible, but the Bible does seem to insinuate that, which is true. In most polygamous homes, you do find such rivalry between children of the different wives. But what I think is most that weighs heavily here is the apparent show of love, favoritism for Joseph, by their father. Siblings don't seem to take this quite well, and unfortunately, You know, rather than take it out on the man or the parent that is actually the culprit in doing this, they take it out on their brother or their sister whom is so favored. And oftentimes these people do not realize that that is what is happening. I do remember very well that you know, I have seen circumstances where that happened, where the father, you know, one child will always be smarter, will always be you know, more intelligent, will always be taller, will have all the qualities that you are looking for, and this endears you to that child. But it doesn't mean you don't love the other children, but you have a special you know, attraction, special connection to this child whom you feel you're proud of because he's doing so well and it's causing you less problems and all that. But as parents, we have to find a way to tone it down. And the role, if the father is doing this, the mother has a, you know, an overshadowing function to make sure it's toned down. I remember in a situation where the father, this child was so smart and everything you can think of, and the father will go out of his way to buy her gifts, buy this. Then the mother, she comes to the mother and says, oh, see what daddy bought for me. The mother will say, don't let your siblings see that. Don't let your siblings see that. You know. So, and it's like, I'm happy that our father bought this, but you know, you don't know what that does to them. So it's very important that we try to, you know, balance it or try to keep it away from being so apparent, because it brings up, wells up, you know, enmity between the children. The other thing now, which I also see, is Joseph, even though he was innocently sharing his dream, it was too premature. You know, in the we've been talking about strategic alliance for some time in our Bible studies. Joseph's, he would have thought that even if he was going to be somebody important, that his brothers, his family would be happy for him. But at this stage in his life, they were just his crowd, not yet his company.
Yeah.
So when you share your dream with your crowd, they will tend to kill him because they don't understand what that is. It was too premature for him to share that dream. I would say that sharing that dream with them was what put the nail in his coffin. That made them, because they said, let's kill him and now let's see what will come of that dream. Yeah. Because he intends to rule over us. Yeah. So we have to be careful, you know, even when we have certain dreams, how we bring it up, whether to our parents, whether to our workers, whether we have to ask God Almighty, the Holy Spirit, to interpret it for us and guide us.
Yes, indeed. And this actually defines a key role for parents, you know, to realize when you have several children, some of them are going to be different. They'll be different from each other. Some might be smarter, some might be taller, some might be shorter and all that. But when you notice the children that have an advantage over others, whatever that advantage is, try to find a way to make it a positive thing. Because the tendency will be for the other children to envy him as if it was his fault or her fault to have gotten this advantage. At times the advantage is natural, at times the advantage is just through hard work. Whatever it is, find a way to redirect things, manage it properly, so that it becomes it leads to a positive experience for the children, a positive relationship, instead of being something that they envy. Joseph's brothers clearly envied him for different things. The most important that we know, of course, is they know that their father loved him more than he loved them. The experience within Joseph's family also, you know, helps us. It brings out the inherent problems of polygamy. These things can happen in any family, but they are more, the chance of happening is increased, or was increased, because in Jacob's family there were essentially four subfamilies: the children of Leah, the children of Rachel, the children of Bilhah, the children of Zilpah. So these were functioning more like 4 families within one. And this must be one of the reasons that Paul counseled Timothy in 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 2 and verse 12. I don't know if you found that. Yeah, 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 2
and 12.
And 12.
Verse 2. Now the overseer must be above reproach, the husband of but one wife, temperate, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach. That's verse 2.
That's verse 2. Then verse 12 is about the same thing, but directed.
A deacon must be the husband of but one wife, and must manage his children and his household well.
So in this council, Paul was talking to Timothy and said, look, don't appoint, I'll just put it in today's terms, don't appoint polygamists as overseers and deacons. I think overseers are replacement of what we call bishops today. Yeah. So don't appoint polygamists as bishops, and don't appoint them as deacons. And he talked about what the role of overseers and the type of person, the personality that was needed. But it was not just personality. I think he was pointing to the problems that can occur in a family because of polygamy, and that these problems will be distracting, so distracting that if the same person is given these positions of importance in the church, that it may affect his or her performance. Well, his performance in this case. Another thing we learn from this is that how God will redirect things, even from a tragedy or an impending tragedy. In this case, Joseph's brothers plotted to kill him, threw him into a well, and eventually pulled him from the well and sold him into slavery. Their intention was not to sell him into slavery. Their intention was to kill him. But through his their most senior brother Reuben and their brother with that had a soft heart, Judah, the brothers were convinced not to kill him, initially to throw him into a well without killing him, and then later on to pull him and sell him into slavery. In future Bible studies, we'll see that this became very important events in Joseph's life, because really God was redirected, or God redirected this to channel him towards his purpose. And we will see that we don't need to peek into what we're going to see in the future. But that does not exonerate his brothers for what they did to him. The fact that God can redirect a tragedy to accomplish his purpose does not exonerate anybody from being an agent of tragedy. What his brothers did was tragic, and they did not. The fact that God saved the situation sort of doesn't mean that they were off the hook. And this, do you have a comment on it?
Oh, well, I think that's for the future. We're still getting into that.
Yeah.
But also from here we can see that it's not sometimes something we regard as tragedy, it's really something that God has designed to set us on the path that he wants us to go.
Yeah.
Some events or occurrences in one's life might really seem very horrible and they are really horrible. But out of that horror, there's a message. And oftentimes, when I go through some very trying things or things that I regard as really very bad, I kind of step back and ask God to show me what is the bigger picture in this. Maybe it will make it more bearable. Maybe it's for me to be able to follow, in that path no matter how difficult it may seem.
Yes, the most important thing is don't ever lose faith in God. It doesn't matter what is facing you. Always, of course, approach your problems. Try to find out what you can do about them. But remain faithful that God will lead you through and find a way to lead you through this. And at the end, that things will be better for you. All things work together for good for those that fear the Lord. We thank you, and this brought us to the end of today's Bible study. We are happy about people that will that some people at their own place and at their own time will be able to participate in the Bible studies to share the information that we have discussed tonight. And whoever will look at this, we pray that what he or she will see something or learn something that will make a positive impact on his life and bring him or her closer to God's purpose. Thank you for viewing and thank you for listening. We hope to share with you again next week. God bless you.